last week we started looking at where Rav Shimon, how Rav Shimon used the story of breaking the luchos, or the luchos, as the case may be. And what he said was that there it is. There's the hat. Thank you. Yes. So.
And of course, it's reversed because.
No, it's only reversed in your camera.
Yeah.
No, it's reversed in mine. It's reversed.
Yeah. Because all the book titles behind me are also reversed.
I can't see. You're too small, so I can't see the book titles behind you. Anyway, so what I was saying is that Rav Shimon focused on asked the question of why did Moshe break the first luchos, right? When he should have just put them away for later giving.
That's right.
Right, and that necessitated begging for another set and all this. So Rav Shimon's answer was that he felt, he based himself on a chazal that said that because God made the first luchos, everything about them was permanent. So if you had just read the luchos, you'd know the whole Torah. And since the people that he was experiencing were not fit for receiving the Torah, he was afraid. It wasn't just that he didn't want them to do it yet. He was afraid that if they did it from these luchos, the ones Hashem made, he would. You'd have people who were, lowly, lowly, vain, self-oriented. I mean, people who had Torah with them, and that was worse than the whole breaking the luchos thing. So he broke the luchos. The second luchos had, pardon?
And there's an H-House logo on the side.
Yes. And right, so he broke the first luchos. He then had to carve the second one himself. By carving the luchos himself, he changes the nature of the luchos. That was where we got. I'm going to pick up from there because we started accelerating toward the end last week. So in order to do that, I have to find the share screen. There. You can see it. I'm sharing the right thing.
Yes.
Okay, just checking. Okay. Techilas Kabbalas Torah Yidei Moshe Rabbeinu Alav Shalom. So, and the beginning, the initial acceptance of the Torah by Moshe, Haisa Demusva Os L'Chol B'nei Yisrael, was a symbol, an image, a symbol, and a sign for all of B'nei Yisrael, Mekablei Torah, when they accept the Torah. K'mo Shamar Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe Alav Shalom. Carve for yourself 2 luchos like the first one. It's such a sign for everybody who received the Torah. Each person has to prepare luchos for themselves. To write on them the word of Hashem. And according to a person's preparation in, their readiness, their kashrus, their preparedness to make the luchos, to prepare the luchos, proportionally will be their reception. Mitchila at the beginning, and also afterwards, a Torah, if afterwards these internal luchos are ruined, then the Torah won't remain either. So one thing you get a lot in spiritual retreats, it's cliche even, life is a journey, not a destination. Moshe actually created that for the Torah by breaking the first luchos. Because studying Torah from the first luchos was permanent. It was a destination. You didn't have to work at it. You didn't have to prepare. There was no path to it. And that was exactly the problem he saw, giving the generation who made the Egel the first luchos. It's kind of like the difference between earning your own money and winning the lottery, right? There's no process to eat from a physical sense, right? Either way, the guy could end up a millionaire, the same amount of money. But because one required a process and preparation and the other one didn't, people who earn their own money tend to succeed at holding on to it a lot better than all the horror stories they tell us about the lottery. So the same thing here. If you just got the Torah without working at the Torah, then it could become even a negative. It become right holy indignation, self-righteousness and all this, right? If you don't have the media preparation for it. So with the second luchos and the idea that Moshe had to carve them first, and similarly we have to prepare ourselves for the Torah, Moshe turned Torah from a destination to a journey. And therefore, people the way we are able to get spirituality out of it. Well, Yedei and in this way, the thing that Moshe was afraid about won't really be all that real. According to the value and the level of a person in Yiras Hashem and in their midos, shehu luach levavo. Notice it starts with Yiras Hashem because Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem. And midos, shehu luach levavo, that is the luchos of the heart, is your Yiras Hashem and your midos. I wonder, I didn't think of this, like this is just hitting me now. I'm wondering if he's actually making them two luchos. The first luach with the 4 mitzvos beinam lamakom and kibbud avayim, which the Rishonim then say is like a beinam lamakom, because how you treat your parents is how you would treat Hashem if you could see him. And that is Yiras Hashem and midos the beinam adam lachavero. I'm wondering now if that was his intent, that each one was a separate luach, but I don't know. That's just off the cuff. So according to that, their level in Yiras Hashem and midos, Yinatein lo min hashamayim kinyan Torah, will be gifted from heaven acquisition in Torah. So, and if a person falls from that level, will proportionally lose the same Torah. Like Chazal say, Shekama inyanim gormim l'shechas Torah, Rahman al-Islan. And Chazal list things that cause a person to forget their Torah. Well, Davar Gadol Zeh, and about this great thing, Amru Chazal said, Lifrosh is a kasav b'siyuma shel Torah, to explain the words at the end of the Torah, L'chol hayad chazakah, right, the mighty hand, L'chol amora gadol, and the awe-inspiring acts of some Moshe, which Moshe did, Le'nei Kol Yisrael.
Okay, now you put in a nukudot.
Oh yeah, no. When it's a pasuk, I put in the nikudos because I could cut and paste them from a pasuk. Typing nikudos was too hard, so I didn't try putting nikudos the whole place. But pasukim, I was able to cut and paste from a place that had nikudos. Okay, ulidati, to my mind, yesh lahamtik bazeh. One can use this idea to elaborate. Really, it's to sweet. Matok is sweet. Masha darshu chazal b'nedarim, what chazal say in the Gemara in Nedarim. Alakasav psalicha. About the verse psalicha. Carve for yourself. Why for yourself? Why doesn't he say to carve? Loher shir Moshe. Moshe only became wealthy. Ela psolasan shalaluchos. only through the extra pieces of the luchos. The luchos were 2 pieces of sapphire, which is either lapis lazuli or sapphire, and he chiseled off these pieces of precious stone, and from these pieces, that was where Moshe's wealth came from. Who you know, Nifla? You got to admit that's a pretty amazing idea, right? Shalom matzah kadosh baruch hu siba acheres la'ashir as Moshe. Hashem couldn't like come up with another reason for Moshe to get rich. Rakal yedei psola shal luchos, only through the extras of luchos. I mean, like, look, it seems so petty compared to, national revelation once in history. Oh, and you could take the little pieces that are extra and sell them and have a little income.
Okay.
So, but Valpia Amor, but according to what we said, Yesh Lafarish said we could explain this. How? Sha'al Ishtanus Hachana Haluchos, because of the change in how the luchos were made. Nitan b'makom lemekable Torah lifchod. There's room. There's a opportunity for those who receive the Torah to be afraid. L'kabel alehem old Torah, not to accept the old Torah. Shaarei al pi zeh roi l'chol boy Shaarei Torah la'afresh. That's asman kol iskei olam, because they think that they therefore have to separate themselves from all the matter of the world. Ukedarshim shal alakosov, like another Gemara which darshins the pasuk lo me'ever yamhi, that the Torah is not it's not in heaven. That's not the part that's relevant to us, and it's not on the other side of the sea. So watch the drasha shalo timtza lo b'sachranim v'lo b'tagranim. You're not going to find it among salesmen or importers. So it would sound like now that you got to spend all this time working at getting Torah, we shouldn't be earning a living because we won't have the time to acquire Torah like the way salesmen can't, aren't going to be selling Torah. Masha'in kain, she'im haya luchos harishonim kaimim. On the contrary, had the first luchos remained, shaz haya dialek voa sha'akala Torah would be enough to just put aside an hour a day for Torah. V'laso grova itim b'mistar u'vikinyan, in trading and in buying. So how did Hashem allay this fear? Hara Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem showed Moshe Rabbeinu Avasham Laos L'chol Mekablei Torah. Turned Moshe into a sign to show all who received the Torah. Sheyazmin Lahem Parnasasam. V'soch Siyas Haluchot. Hashem will prepare income from them through the making of these luchos, in quote. Through the extra little shard of the luchos, that's how you get your income. So you shouldn't think, oh my God, I shouldn't go out to make a living because, if I make a living, when am I going to have the time to learn Torah? And learning Torah takes so much work. His answer is no. It is going out to make a living is how you refine. In other words, the main job of going to work is to work on your midos. You're a shemaim also. If you're in sales, you really you know how much it's out of your control. If you're in another job, if you're a computer programmer, just pick a random example, an artisan of some other sort, then you could start convincing yourself that, it's in your control. Your Hashem comes a little harder, but you can't do business in the long run. Let's put it another way. You have to be really lucky to be able to do business in the long run without developing your midos. Right? I mean, a mafioso could end up rich. So I can't say it as an absolute statement. But the whole point of getting a job is to work on your midos. And therefore, getting a job is preparing the luchos that you will engrave your Torah upon.
So the job's an opportunity for us to work on midos.
The job is an opportunity to work on midos, and having an income is a side effect. Think of when we were first told you got to go get a job, right? Adam Arishon internalizes the desires for good and evil, right? And God says, get the heck out of here. First, he's afraid that they'll eat from the Eitz HaChaim, which, interestingly enough, is a term used to describe the Torah as well. And then he tells them, after dealing with the snake and Chava, he tells Adam, now you got to go get a job, right? Farming is not, the bread's not going to grow on trees anymore. You got to go deal with the thorns and the weeds and all this, right? Having to make a living is because we internalize the Yetzer Hara. And now he's saying, that's my own little 2 cents. Well, maybe more than 2 cents. It's a bigger piece than that. And now he's saying that the way to acquire Torah or the new Eitz Chaim in this, plane of existence, second Luchos kind of existence, the makeup system, is to work on your midos by having a living, which requires cooperating with other human beings. So that the whole going to a job thing wasn't just a punishment. It was also a remediation of the problem. And earning a living is a side effect, and the real goal is to perfect the self. Robert, you hadn't joined yet, but we saw when we were learning the Kuntras HaChesed that Rav Dessler talks about, he talked about giving and taking, and then he asks, well, if taking it, the will to give and the will to take, which is different than actually giving and taking. I mean, there's an attitude to taking that's not necessarily true if you're receiving in other ways, and therefore he has to make a detour and discuss business, because business is all giving and taking. And he says that the real success in business comes when you're looking to see how you can provide value with every transaction. If you engage in business looking to see how you can get from every transaction, that is the koach hanito, the power, the will to take.
Yeah.
Right? If you look to see how you can provide value, then that's the will to give. So the very same transaction could be coming from either place. But that's what he's saying here with he brought examples like, who was it? Who think of Chavetz Chaim, who decided not to go to go out of the grocery business because it was at the expense of the other people. It was at the expense of the other grocers. So first he tried reducing the hours so that they would get business, because everybody wanted to support the Chavetz Chaim, and therefore nobody was supporting anybody else. And even the reduced hours, so then they'd come during the reduced hours. So eventually he went out of the grocery business because he didn't feel it was fair competition for, because buying from him carried the clout of supporting the Chavetz Chaim. The other example he brought was Hanoch, according to Rav Yisrael Salanter. So the Chazal say that Hanoch was a shoemaker. With every stitch, he wouldn't just attach the soles to the uppers. He'd connect. He'd unify the Shem Hashem. So you could see how Hasidim would just take that at face value. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, on the other hand, said that can't be taken at face value, because if you're paid to make a product, you're halachically prohibited to be distracted and thereby risk producing an inferior product. So this couldn't possibly be praise that Chazal was giving Chanuch, because it's not praiseworthy activity. He says no, it was that exactly, with the fact that Hanoch stitched every stitch, thinking only of how can he provide his customer the best shoe. That was itself unifying Hashem's name. So that's what I see here when Rav Shimon talks about the main point of going to work and earning a living, as opposed to like the Adam existence, which the Zohar says, we got 40 days of between between the giving of the Torah and the we were gonna be there again when Hashem gave the Torah the first time, and we ruined it with the Egel. But that Adam existence, right? When we fell from that plane and we needed to work on our midos again, so then we were given jobs, and that's why the second luchos, right? You prepare the surface, right? That was where he went with this, and with that we actually finish the series we were doing, because as you see here, well, I'll just read in English. And here by Hashem's compassion upon me, placed my portion among those who work for the community. For in the year 5644, I was called by my great uncle in law, Rabbi Lazer Gordon, to be a teacher of students and tells. I merited the opportunity to draw. You see, here he's actually, I called paragraph 5 acknowledgement. I mean, it actually is like the part of the book that just introduces the book. Here he warns people that they may not like the book because it's too heavy. So that's the and he talks about the need to not just learn from a Rebbe. This is an interesting point. It's off topic, but since I just caught my eye, we're going to do it anyway. Vishamanti davar na'el miskabel b'shem Gisi Hamanoach. So I heard a pleasant and compelling idea from my late brother-in-law, Harav Agon Moreno Rav Shlomo Zalman ben Rav Kalman Abel Mitels. So what was his brother-in-law's idea? Bahad de Mesuba Gemara, that which is told in the Gemara in Baba Kama, the sugya de zenen of Zelo Chaser. The topic is when one person gains and the other person doesn't lose, and the evil of depriving the first person of their gain when you don't stand anything to lose. Rav Chisda by Rami Bar Chama. Rav Chisda asked of Rami Bar Chama, the Heishiv lo l'chi tashmishli, and he responded, instead of giving him an answer, he responded, go do some service for me. Shakal Sudra Karachle. So he lifted Rav Chisda's scarf, and Rami Bar Chama's scarf, and he folded it. Because at first glance, it's perplexing. Ubiyar Rav Hanira Le'el, and the aforementioned rabbi, meaning his brother-in-law, the matter is something which requires great deep thought and contemplation. He gives an idea that he really wants you to spend time internalizing, thinking about. The essence of the matter hangs upon whether the person who is trying to teach themselves. Hey, notice mislamed, John. Not lilmod, it's lihislamed, to teach oneself, like Ravolbi. Mamin b'malas hamalamdo. Does the person who is being taught believe in the greatness of his teacher? Azim lo yavin barishona. If he doesn't understand right away, yila chisaron ba'atzmo, he'll assume that it's his own flaw. B'yosifo matz liga etzatzmo, and he will put in the effort to strain himself. Baz yavin bachrona, and he'll eventually understand. Aval im divrei hamalamdo kalim beinov, But if he doesn't think that the Rebbe is all that great, and his words are kind of light, unimportant in his eyes, below shava lo lesamet lamo bahem, it won't be worth it for him to like really work at understanding them. As imlo yikabel advarim b'mishkal rishon, if he doesn't get it at first thought, yaniach o yavatlam belibo, he'll put them aside or dismiss them from their heart. B'dayo, and it'll be enough for him. L'chein kasher yada Rami Bar Chama es omeka inyan. When Rabbi Chama saw the depth of the topic that Rav Chisda Sharatza Lilamdo,
I see.
right? Lo Ratza Lilamdo ad sheyis ametz lo Sherav Chisda mishtokek l'talmud lamed mimenu k'talmud meirav. He wanted to be sure that Rav Chisda was treating him and understanding him with the right respect. He didn't want him to treat the topic lightly. Therefore, he didn't want to teach him until he would apprentice him the way a Talmud would apprentice his Rebbe. And there's grace in the words of the wise. And in this way, so then we could explain what the Chazal Darshan and Yuma on the pasuk. Avram Zakein Baba Yamim. Avram was an elder coming on in days. Hashem Berachas Avram Makol, just to complete the pasuk. Hashem blessed Avram with everything. Amar Rav Chama Barabi Hanina. Rav Chama says in the name of Rabbi Hanina. Miyimei Mishalavosenu Lo Paska Yeshiva Mehem. From the days of our forefathers, yeshiva was never interrupted. Avram Zakein v'yashay b'yeshiva. Avram became an elder, and then he was able to sit still and study full time. Lo nispar mehechan lamdu in yemikrazeh. They don't explain where they got this from. Ba'al pi devarenu yesh la'amro. According to what we just said, one can say, Dinei begemara bava mitzia isa ad Avram lo havizikna. The Gemara in Baba Metzia says that until Avram, there was no such thing as old age. People died and they didn't feel it coming. Manda have a lishtai. And anyone who came to converse to Bahade Avram with Avram, have a mishtai Bahade Yitzchak, could end up having a conversation with Yitzchak instead. The Yitzchak have a mishtai Avram, or they'd go over to Yitzchak and it would be Avram, because there was no such thing as gray hair or old age. Avram came and asked for aging. So what is the zikna they're talking about? I mean, this is obviously, at least for the four of us, it should be obvious that they're not actually literally talking about that no one aged and no one had gray hair until then. So what concept of aging are they trying to discuss here? Huseva hamiskala lechol ayin roeh. It's an elderliness that makes itself obvious to every eye that sees. L'chein limdu Chazal mizeh. Therefore, Chazal learned from this. Shehaya Avram Yoshev b'yeshiva. That Avram sat in a yeshiva, in an academy, not a yeshiva in the modern sense. Sheikar, I mean, the Torah was given yet. It can't be yeshiva in the modern sense. Sheikar hato eles lahakir malas hazikna mitlamed. The main purpose of recognizing the value of aging is to teach. Shem yakir sharoi lefanav lahamik b'davar malamdo az yasi katoelas hanirtzesh kamo shekasafnu. So the value of old age is that people treat you with more respect, and when you say something, they'll actually try to understand you. And therefore, he says that you got this book, but don't open the book if you're not going to take it seriously and try to learn from the book the way I just described. I mean, that's it really is like the introduction to the Sefer. So it was interesting, though, this statement that the main value in getting older is that people would know that you've been on the world for a while and you know something, so they'll pay more attention to what you say. And what we see in practice is so contrary to this that It's just a rambling old man, and and less effort is put in understanding him, and it's kind of interesting to me either way. So that was the series, and all I have left now is reviews. So let's do this a little conversationally. So, what would you take away? Let's start with Shaarei Yosher. What would you take away from Shaarei Yosher, as opposed to every bullet item I listed here, which is a bunch? Oh no, nothing. There's
Well,
no takeaways.
the scope it's large and wide. I mean, when you look at the base text itself, it doesn't look like it does not look to me like other books of Musar. But when you read it in the way we're reading it, it is. And it seems to be a systematic way to go through these elements of Jewish theology, but we're looking at it in a different way. It's realigning, or it's trying to realign how the reader is understanding our role, how the reader is trying to understand our practice. I mean, what you just said 15 minutes ago was something very deep and profound, something I wanted to mention to my daughter about how we think that we have to go out there and get a job because realistically most of us do. So, to pay rent, to pay mortgage, food, for health. But if you just flip that around 180 degrees, what if we read what you just read? And what if we actually believe it? What if we believe even half of it? If you believe even 25% of what you just said, our job is an opportunity to work on our midot. That just reverses the entire vector of how people think about living in their daily life. That's revelatory.
Something Rav Dessler said in Contras HaChesed was he asked what he asserted that the reason why we were all stuck in the same world. Right. So he asked, why were we all stuck in the same world? Because then you're going to take from each other. He said, yeah, but then you can never give to each other. It's like the whole concept of not having your own Garden of Eden and living by yourself is to force those interactions. But to the first point you made, that it doesn't read like a typical Musar text, because it's not. He only mentions Midas and Yiras Hashem he mentions three things about Midos, about self-work. He talks about the need to commit, to be consecrated, Kedusha, right? That you need to be consecrated to a goal, and therefore you may have to avoid other goals. I guess Kedusha and Perishus, right, in the very beginning. He talks about Yiras Hashem as the beginning of the work on the Luchos, and then just the word Midos with no specificity. His focus is Musar Li in that it's interpersonal first, but it's not Musar Li in terms of saying all that much about self-work.
Yeah, it's more implicit than explicit.
Well, I think he's defining a goal of life and not really spending as much time about how to get there. He's framing life and life's goals in a certain way for asking you to reframe them, but he didn't take the next step and start telling you, and therefore do this and this and this. So it lacks that kind of, a lot of Musar books are just go from Mida to Mida to Mida, right? Whether it's Mesilas Yesharim, Atomer Devora, to some extent Chovas Halavavos. Although Chovas Halavavos also deals with ideas, not just with attitudes. So it's a little bit of a mix.
Yeah, that's very interesting precisely because it's different. I'm just thinking this off the top of my head. Perhaps this book could speak to people who might benefit from Musar or be interested in it but who say, "Oh, I've read some of that. It doesn't really speak to me." So it's an alternate pathway to explore these ideas.
Well, when I sent the book over to the publisher, sorry, when I approved the last draft of the book, I started a Facebook group called Other Focused Orthodoxy with the idea that there would be people who would buy into the Musser's definition of what the Torah is about without being committed enough to spend time each day doing Mida work. And that in itself was a lesson that Musser could leave a wider audience. Musser never really caught on, and a likely reason is because it's a lot of work. Like, to the extent that it existed as a movement, it existed as an educational movement, not as a communal movement. Right? You didn't have communities of Mussarists the way there were communities of Hasidim. You had networks of schools.
It's caught on a bit in Boston, which unfortunately I can't get down there quite as much as I like. But there is serious interest in Cambridge, Boston, that area.
Right. So I have a friend. His name is Dr. Alan Marinis. He lives in Vancouver. He wrote a book called Climbing Jacob's Ladder, which actually made it into the Sunday New York Times book review, which is pretty good for a Jewish book. The book tour grew into an organization called the Musser Institute. And the book tour had generated so much interest that all through the non-Orthodox world, there's a lot of interest in Musser. And I taught for the Musser Institute for years. Right now, and part of the reason why this group exists is I felt that they were drifting. Like, you had students who were students for so long they wanted to be teachers, and the teachers aren't as grounded in traditional forms of Judaism as the first round of teachers were. So it's drifting to territory that's outside my comfort zone.
Mm.
So I wanted another learning platform so that I had the ability to say no without feeling like I wasn't talking to anybody. So that's really why when this group got started was last year, when the Musser retreat had Musser mandalas, and I said, no, that's neo Musser, and that's not what I want to be associated with.
It's not even neo Musser. It's not even Musser anymore. Yeah.
Whatever. It was, the problem that they had was they didn't know how to do something on Zoom. It was a Corona thing. They needed activities, not just, classes and discussions and VODs and Chavrusa time and whatever. They needed activities because there's no physical, walking around a campus when they had a retreat, an actual retreat. So they came up with creative expressions, and not all of them were really on target. So I just didn't have an interest. On the other hand, they're now getting more cooperation from Mr. figures in places like North Yerushalayim, and among Haredim who are actually willing to teach. We've had a mashgiach ruchani from Sanhedria and a Reform rabbi give a class together. So there are marks of holding on to the actual authentic messages. That particular program was outside my comfort zone. I wanted the freedom to say no, and I had started having this fear that I'd never be working with them again. I needed something else. So that was sort of the. But in any case, back to this. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that there's interest in Boston, and in fact, Rabbi David Jaffe from the Gon Academy has his own Changing the World from the Inside Out, which ties Mida work to Musser, to Rav Nachman, to Tikkun Olam type activities, but he would never call them Tikkun Olam because he's a little more orthodox than that crowd. But that's but he's out there, and he must be near you because he teaches at Gon.
Yeah,
Um,
probably
yeah.
an hour and 20 minutes away, that area.
yeah. Well, from here it's near you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the I hear, but that's why I think it has a different feel. Is because it's not really a Musser work. I would say it's more a philosophical work from a Musser perspective. Right. I think though that there's a bigger audience for it than for actual Musser. That was where I went. People who'd be inspired attending Triple SJ rallies, but don't really want to spend 15 minutes an evening journaling. Keeping a cheshbon and nefesh. I think that that's a much bigger audience. So, whatever. Um, Anybody else want to comment what they walked away with?
That speaks to me, and as much as I am not a particularly disciplined person, but meditation for a while really worked out. So, reading, interacting, learning these texts of it has been quite useful to keep things in mind. You know, the hard part does have to come at some point. You have to work on your needs. Some of the story. That's it. Um, keep on learning.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, I know, and I plan on teaching other texts. I just think that the next topic that we chose is a little totally different. Um, so I wanted to pause. I want to find a way to reach people who would be interested in philosophy more than this interpersonal focus we've had till now. Um, so that's the only reason why we're stopping. Um, Oh, and I'm going to Israel, so like half that time we wouldn't have been meeting anyway. So might as well be clean and plan it. To me, I mean, to most people, obviously, the whole business about broadening the self. To me, that this idea that giving comes from sharing of myself and extending myself, as opposed to selflessness. The value of giving through self-fullness and investing in other and building bridges to others. And now we're all part of one big engine. And my value comes from my role in a community as opposed to, yay me, being a team player as opposed to hugging the ball and getting all the limelight that way. To me, that was really like, what I keep in mind with this, the idea that, the person who wants to be selfless ends up being merciful or maybe even move into pity. Whereas somebody who feels a connection and self-full moves into empathy and shares the pain and shares the successes, and it's a whole different level of unity. And it's that Olam Hayedidut that we had seen with Rav Volbe, building a world of dearness, of what was the I don't remember what word I used for Yedidos in the past, but a world of affection to me was a big deal, and also that he starts with me, my soul, and works his way to people, so that your relationship with Hashem both comes in the very beginning because it's the small quiet voice in your soul that you first encounter God, and at the end when you're at one with the universe. But really, it's well again. I mean, even something like the measure of the soul or holiness boils down to this. Early in the days of the other focused orthodoxy group, I came up with the aphorism. Um, one of the most effective ways to come close to a parent is to do something special for their children. And that as an approach to avodas Hashem, I think is very attractive to me. But I mean, I got to say, growing up, the Triple SJ rallies were probably the most inspiring part of my childhood. This idea of needing a kumsitz to be inspired is It's nice, and I ran a singing minion for years. Not Kabach songs in particular, but there's something about building a home for humanity, this kind of thing, that it's a source of inspiration that we're not really providing our kids the same way that we provide the kumsitz or Anyway, that to me was what I walked away with when I learned this the first time in memory. So, John,
Uh,
okay, can't argue with that.
Mm,
Caliente.
really?
So, right. So, if you recall, we started with the threes, right? And the Maharal had his version of the three, and the Gra had his version of the threes, right? There were the three worlds, the three relationships, the three aspects of the soul, three crowns, and then there was the Kesher Shem Tov as a non-crown. From the threes, we got to Rav Wolbe, who discussed a world of Yedidus, which he also discussed in the threes. Yedidus with Hashem, Yedidus with other people, and being in touch with our own souls. And Achzarias, that brilliant cruelty, is Ach Pladzarias, pure estrangement. We had Kutras Chesed and developing the will to give. Now the will to take gets in the way of being able to see truth. We saw also Rabbi Wolbe talk about frumkeit, from the as observing God. Avodas Hashem. No, frumkeit as an alternative to Avodas Hashem, where all your focus is on is your own holiness. So it's also coming from the will to take, and not the will to give. But there's a way to think that you're doing Avodas Hashem, but really you're just feeding the will to take. And then we saw giving as a way of building connections, and Hakaras Hatov is a way to receive to give in your receiving, and therefore building connection. And that through that you can become one with the universe, as opposed to, as Rav Wolbe puts it, the mystical union, which Judaism doesn't teach is possible. That was really what I was trying to get from the series was and my being convinced that the Kalim and the Mishkan and their placement represents all of this. That was how this whole conversation started, if you recall. Right, that there are three crowned Kalim, which the Gemara discusses, three uncrowned Kalim, which the Gemara doesn't discuss. Now, each of the three uncrowned Kalim, the Kior, the Mizbeach, and the Choshes, and the, what's it called? And the menorah actually represent one of the three, right? And that was okay. So on. Enough review. If nobody has any other thoughts, I want to leave with homework, with a how-to. You want to get something, you want to actually do something with what we've discussed in the last half a year. So I found this actually in a Vidui booklet that was put together in either the late 70s or early 80s. I found this summarized. I was able to find the original text, and I personally translated it, which is kind of silly because Strive for Truth is probably a better translation. But what happened was, during the Blitz, Rav Dessler was in Gateshead at the Mashgiach, and he had to deal with a school full of very scared students, because between the bombings and the idea that the Nazis might actually establish concentration camps in England, they really didn't know what was going to happen next. and there was a urgent feel on the part of most people there that they had to do some kind of tshuva, some kind of getting ready for whatever came on a religious level. And Rav Dessler gave this short piece called Tshuva Derech Ketzara, a shortcut, a short path to tshuva. In it, he gives a program of 4 steps, which is 8 steps easier than some other programs. I've spent the last 3 weeks to a month trying to implement them. So I'm really taking them by them right now. And therefore, since they give us a way to close the topic with something, with some tachlis, as we say, I'm going to share it now. Based on in this frightening time, we don't know what the day is going to bring. We really can't work on the do the work of ascent, of spiritual ascent. The masud or orderly, correct way what we do in normal years. Zikukim anu l'tshuva derech ketzara. Therefore, it's appropriate for us now we have a calling to do this shortcut to tshuva. Begeder yesh kono lama b'shah achat. In the under the rubric of there are those who acquire their world in 1 hour, like the Roman who let Shimon Shop die quickly. That's where the quote's from. Hainu refuah klalis. It's a general remedy l'chatayim for sins. Begeder azara rishona, under the, I don't want to use the word rubric again, but under the category of first aid. And therefore, he recommends that we should try working in 4 areas. Limud Torah, lavriach haYetzer, learning Torah to chase away the Yetzer Hara. So, Aruch HaShulchan Yomi has that done for me. I've been learning halacha every day before this, but I didn't change anything when I read this. Limud HaMusar. No idea why this came out Mosar. Not done, let me down. So learning Musar, Kinyas Mabad HaEmes, to acquire a view of the truth. Like the pasuk says, Chesed ve'emes yichu par avot. Through chesed and through truth, sin is atoned. V'isragel b'shviras haratzon, make a habit of breaking desire. Kamosha Kasav Rabbeinu Yonah in Yesod Tshuva, in the name of the Ravid, Shechoshuv Kaharbe Tanios B'chol Yom, getting used to breaking your desire. You don't need to satisfy every desire that comes your way, right? That is more powerful than if you did numerous fasts each day. Ayin Shamgo, see there, Ubezem Misakein Sivas Achet, and this solves the cause of the Chet, Kenegen Mishuvasan, Te Tshuvasan. According to their error, I mean, it's a wordplay, obviously, so is their repair. So is their tshuva. And the last of the 4, laharbos b'machzeh chesed, increasing one act of kindness, b'machzeh chesed liyichidim, whether it's acts of chesed to individuals, b'im pu'ulos avar klal Yisrael, or activities to help the Jewish people as a community, as a whole. The gam chesed alev, even chesed in the heart. No say ba'olim chavero, sharing another's pain, usfil al acherim, or davening. So even if you can't do chesed physically, you're never putter from chesed, because there's chesed you could do, just without moving. So he's recommending 4 things here. Do you see why what's it called? Do you see the connection? John, you're the only one whose face I could see.
Oh.
It's 4 topics, right?
Yeah.
Learning Torah, learning Musar, right? Breaking this need to satisfy every desire and to do more chesed. So what I see is learning Torah, learning Musar, working on the will to take, and working on the will to give.
Yeah.
So his fast track to tshuva comes straight out of his kontras chesed. That's the way I'm reading this. So if I made myself 3 resolutions, because I was already learning Aruch Shulchan Yomi, so there is a minimal amount of Torah I'm learning every day. But like, I picked up a Musar text to study every day. I now, leave food over on the plate at the end of every meal. And I took on an extra chesed, which I'm not going to discuss. I'll tell you why I'm not going to discuss it in a minute. And in that way, I'm trying to take what he said in Kuntras HaChesed and use it to become more able to, that my greatest desire should be to the benefit of others, as Rav Shimon put it. Yep. Now, the reason why I don't want to discuss what it is I accepted in Chesed is I noticed that I get very easily sidetracked by, look how great I am.
Yep. Okay.
So the only way I could actually use increasing my acts of Chesed as a way to develop my will to give is if I keep it private. So no details. I'm just saying I did it. Okay. But matzav she'ein b'reira k'ma matzavenu, in a situation where you have no choices like our situation, nitein al yidei ma'aseh chesed l'taking gam chatoim shbeinam l'chavero. We are going to use these acts of chesed to also repair sins between one person and another, because usually you have to deal with the individual. He's just explaining that you don't have the opportunity to make amends with every individual you wronged, because they're in a crisis situation. So therefore, like the Gemara says in Beitza, you stole and you don't know who you stole from, do things for the community. Because this way, one of the beneficiaries has to be the person that you wronged. So by doing chesed, you can do tshuva, even if it's not a minimal sort of tshuva, but some kind of tshuva, even if you can't identify everybody you wronged. So, I would, I personally committed to doing these 4 things every day. That's that would be my take home from this whole series, because it's practical advice based on one of the texts we learned, and how to get out of a self-focus from me, look how holy I am, or I need to be holier kind of religiosity, of the first luchos, I got it already, and move on to a Judaism of how can I have a Torah's chesed, a Torah that brings loving kindness to the world, and I'm sharing with other people and is a benefit to other people. And with that, I want to close the series. No, that's not true. With a Q&A after that, I want to close the series.